Hello everyone. Today, Outlook, the official AUB student-led newspaper, is carrying on its yearly tradition of interviewing our esteemed president, Dr. Fadlo Khuri. First, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Khuri, for your time, effort, for making this happen, and specifically for hosting us at the Marquand House. My name is Maria Chirvanian. I'm a fourth-year economics student at AUB, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Outlook. I'm here with Dina and Nader, two board representatives.
Hello, so my name is Dina Al Amood. I'm a third-year economics major and I'm the managing director for Outlook this year.
And I'm Nader Al Masri. I'm a fourth-year computer and communications engineering student and I'm the operations director.
So, first, we'd like to start off with some personal questions, Dr. Khuri. We know that you spent your student years here at AUB during the Civil War. So what memories come to mind when you think back to those days? And did it shape the kind of president you became?
So, thank you, Maria, Dina, Nader. I spent really only my first year in college at AUB, but it had a profound influence. I'd spent 10 years at the International College right next door, but I would argue that that 1 year at AUB had as much of an impact on me as the 10 years at IC and the 3 years at Yale subsequently. And what was it about AUB that shaped my view of universities and my role in the governance of AUB as president? First of all, AUB has always been well known for its student engagement and activism. I got to see that up close and personal during the war. It was nonviolent in that there were no weapons, but certainly there were confrontations and occasionally clashes. And some of those clashes were not armed clashes, but they were physical clashes. So I was very determined when I started not to see any physical confrontations, particularly between students. I also realized the overwhelming influence and power of the faculty. I learned that the faculty can influence the students with and against the administration, but typically they can mentor students, they can direct students, or they can influence students. So it's very important to have the faculty on board with what it is you're trying to do. Finally, I gained an enormous appreciation for the AUB staff. They really are the glue that keeps this university together. On days when the students and the faculty don't or can't show up, the staff are here. The staff really are the permanent army of the university. They commit to this university because they love it and because they see that it can create possibilities for their families and particularly their children that no other institution in Lebanon or the region can do. So it made me determined at some point to think of that staff in everything I did. Certainly, the students are at the center, and I was once a student here. The faculty are world-class and irreplaceable in so many ways, but it is the staff who, for me, represent the core mission of the university. How many of the staff's children learn here? Can we ensure that our staff graduate with dignity and don't sacrifice their lives simply to educate their kids and get their families cared for? So that was probably the most powerful lesson I learned from AUB.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Okay, so before stepping into academic leadership, we know you spent decades in medicine. So what inspired your decision to move from clinical medicine into academic leadership?
Thank you, Nader. I was already in academic leadership, albeit academic medical leadership. I was an executive associate dean, a deputy center director, a department chair. So many things such as promotion and tenure and evaluation of students and care of staff and of institutional prerogatives and reputation I was quite familiar with. But I had to expand my horizons to look at non-medicine, non-health related aspects. You say what inspired me? Well, I've never said no to AUB. And so when the opportunity and the mandate came from the board chair, then Philip Khuri, and the search committee for me to assume this role, it was not one that I was actively seeking. I applied 1 week before the first set of interviews. But for those of us who understand just what this university means to all of us, that this institution is the greatest thing we have in Lebanon, the Levant, or indeed the Arab world, the one consistently world-class, aspirational, mission-oriented institution that allows us to know that we are not children of a lesser God. I did not feel I had any alternative but to accept this position, which is a tremendous honor.
Yeah. And are there any moments you still miss from the hospital floor or the clinical work?
Of course, every day I love the hospital in particular. I learned to like and enjoy the clinic, but the clinic, you're moving from appointment to appointment. You're dealing with patients, their lives, their health, sometimes their endings, and you're pressured for time. The hospital is different.
Yeah.
Patients are always thrilled to see you. If you show up at 7 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, or 2 in the morning, they are delighted to see their physician. So I miss the hospital and I visit it as often as I can. I do miss the clinic, clinical research, and the tremendous impact that basic fundamental science, translational research, and clinical medicine are having on cancer and medical patients. I enjoyed my participation in it. It's just not possible for me to have that kind of bandwidth and serve AUB as faithfully as I believe it deserves.
Yeah, right.
So we want to move on a little bit to speak about what the past year has meant for Lebanon, for the region, but also to reflect on the entirety of the 10 years that you've been here at AUB. So what has the past 5 years taught you about what it means to Lebanon and to the region, specifically in the context of fundraising? Because that's something that you've taken on to kind of redefine how fundraising is done. Just between October and November of 2024, you were able to close the $50 million deficit that the university was running, and that was during the context of the war. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. It's a complex question, not to say complicated. So Dina, when I joined the university, I wanted to make sure that I was very clear, not seeking transparency, but honesty in what our plans were for AUB. And they were never my plans. These were plans that we built consensus for, first at the board, then with the faculty and staff and students. And students, because their journey in the educational process of a university or a college is shorter, their attention span is also more immediate, sometimes more impatient. So I want to be very clear that I saw my mandate as transforming AUB's economic identity. We wanted the university to become what it always should have been, what it once was and needed to once more become, which was a university for the best and brightest, irrespective of their ability to pay. You could argue that the past 5 years, the past 10 years, but most acutely the last year, has been a demonstration of that vision. And we'll talk about this, I suspect, later. But in my view, what we learned is that if you have a great cause, and if you allow your mission to drive your mandate and your margin and your budget, then you can make a case to the best of your ability and sometimes better than your ability, that the education and transformation of the lives of students and the communities they come from is at the core of the mission of a great university, and this is a great university. So the budget deficit was, as you indicated, unanticipated. I will be completely honest and say I started to anticipate an increase in the intensity of the war, the end of July, when first Fuad Shukr and then Ismail Haniyeh were assassinated. I recognized that the Lebanese participants in this war did not understand the magnitude of the escalation. And I fully anticipated that things would escalate dramatically, which is why I came back earlier than planned. It's also why I decided to travel for a longer trip than I had planned, where we went around the world, 49,000 miles, I think in about 7 weeks. And that wasn't all fundraising, it was also to get the message out about not just what we were doing, but just how vital, how irreplaceable this university is. Fortunately, I think it was a successful trip, and as you indicated, we were able to raise some $42 million in new commitments. Now, some of those were new commitments from US aid that unfortunately will not see the light of day at this point. But this did help us to get back on the track that we need to go, which is to continue to evolve the university and not lose that precious identity of it being a university for all people who earn the right to be admitted here within our capacity as a small, private, not-for-profit university that really aspires to achieve excellence for its own sake, but also for the greater good.
And just to continue about that idea you've spoken about, obviously the idea that there must be socioeconomic representation across the board within Lebanon, or even in the representation of international students. And so you've created new scholarships along with the administration, particularly after the economic collapse, but even in the light of the recent events. So can you tell us about what these scholarships are and how are they being funded?
Certainly. So when I started, and if you go back to my inaugural address in January of 2016, I indicated we had a great decision to make. Would we become more economically elite than we were intellectually elite, or would we take on the far larger challenge of becoming more intellectually excellent than we were economically elite? And those scholarships range from individual term scholarships to pay people's tuition, from discounts to members, to children of the public sector. This became more acute. You asked me about the last 5-year period. Well, the state of Lebanon essentially collapsed in its abilities to be able to support the public. And one of those was the economic collapse that Lebanon experienced, the third worst on record in the last 150 years. This meant that the people who felt it most acutely were individuals whose businesses were destroyed or who were in the public sector. Children of the army and internal and general security officers and others, professors at the Lebanese university, children of the judiciary. And we felt that we needed to step up for Lebanon to try to create opportunities for individuals who come from families that are in the public sector, honest families that don't have resources such as land or other things to sell. So these were created to help bridge the gap until the return of the state, which we hope will take place in the next few years. Certainly there are encouraging signs towards that. Second, we created endowments. The endowments came from a number of sources, but largely from alumni and friends of AUB. We expanded the number of scholarships for people, particularly from Lebanon and Syria and Palestine and Jordan. Our communities in those areas stepped up, as did alumni bodies throughout the Gulf, throughout Europe, throughout the US, who created scholarships from individuals who came from families who resided there but wanted to come back. And then we dramatically increased the foundation, USAID, MEPI scholarships. The MasterCard Foundation is one of the great examples of that. We've now had several intakes of outstanding students from Africa, but we expanded that with the cooperation and the leadership of the great Rita Roy, who's the CEO of the MasterCard Foundation, to also include underprivileged Lebanese children of Syrian refugees or children who are themselves Syrian refugees, Palestinian refugees, and others. This helped us to create an ecosystem of virtuous individuals with different backgrounds. Some were able to pay their full tuition. Some could pay no tuition at all. And so that's shifted that from that, 46% of people averaging 29% to about 88% of people averaging 55%, with a quarter of the university students getting a full scholarship. That's a major change to undergo when your country's economy collapses. So all the money that we and others had in the banks, much of it was lost, as you know, at least for now. So it required creating scholarships, generous accounting on our side, and a transition to a stable currency, which was the dollar. That's why all of the current scholarships and all the endowed scholarships nowadays are in US dollars.
So, President Khuri, you've already mentioned USAID, which is a university scholarship program which AUB has long relied on to bring in top students from Lebanon and across the region. So what does the recent cutoff mean for those students?
So, Maria, USAID has been helping AUB practically since its inception. In the 60s, USAID became the most generous funder the university had ever seen. It accounted at one point for more than half of the budget of the university. And then in the late 60s, that was tapered down to almost nothing. The president of the university then, Sam Kirkwood, had to increase the tuition by 10% per year. Of course, this intersected with some populist anger at the outcome of the Palestinians, at the disparities in wealth in Lebanon. Then you had the infamous campus riots where this house and College Hall, much of the university was occupied by students. 103 students were expelled. I believe President Kirkwood was communicating at the time, but perhaps, as I indicated earlier, it's harder to reach the students where they can really hear you. In fact, USAID stepped up substantially since I started my presidency. So the peak of US government support for us came in the most critical time, 2020, 2021, 2022. We're averaging over $30 million a year, USAID, MEPI, and other support. But of course, this is a government mandated program, and ultimately the decisions in the United States are made by the executive branch. Funding is allocated by the legislative branch, but the president has shown that he is unwilling to obey, and that seems to be his right, prior allocations, decisions made by the legislative branch. So we have seen that USAID funding be terminated precipitously. That leaves us with a significant gap in this year's budget, about $15 million. But overall, after this year, it'll be nearly $30 million a year. We're working to overcome that literally as we speak, to make sure that the students who've benefited from USAID in the past, even though that program for now has been terminated, will be able to continue at AUB, albeit with some changes in what we can offer them. But we're going to do everything possible to make sure that no one leaves AUB for economic reasons, as long as they try to work with us to arrive at a fair solution. So I believe we're quite confident that the students who are in the USAID programs will continue with us, considering that they continue to match their academic and their social obligations, or I would say co-academic, for now until they graduate. The great regret we have is we'll struggle to bring in new intakes of these exceptional students, but we will look after these students. They say the best judge of future behavior is current and past behavior, and our behavior and our track record is such that students have not left this institution because they couldn't pay.
Okay, so given the impact of the recent war, and you had already mentioned that, and Outlook dedicating a lot of Volume 57 on covering it, we'd like to ask you about your approach and the challenges you have faced while balancing the students' safety with upholding AUB's educational standards during the recent war, and especially when the war has erupted.
Sure. So we, as I said, that we anticipated the war would escalate. Of course, we have no information, no contact with the Israelis. We don't know what they're going to do. We have very little contact with any of the parties except for the official Lebanese government and the US government. So we had to make accommodations and plans, and I wouldn't call them guesstimates or estimates, but we had to take steps to place the safety of our community as the top priority. The very next was care and education of the people we serve, so patients and students. We had substantial experience in online distance learning, both at the time and ways to save the information so it could be uploaded. And we had to balance safety and accessibility. That required we take some tough decisions. Given the country's challenging bandwidth from the internet perspective, given the dramatic decline in safety during this period, people having to come back and forth, we tried to ensure that the top priority to come to campus was for what I would call the most urgent of the core community, the students, the faculty, the staff, physicians and nurses, and the administrators. So if students couldn't come except once a week, once a month, but they had poor internet, they could upload a month's worth of lectures. We also worked with the faculty to support them so that they would in turn feel supported and support the students. This meant that many of our students finished the fall semester incomplete. When the war ended, or the assault ended on the morning of November 27, we had to very quickly plan under leadership of the provost and the registrar to administer the exams. In fact, the exams were only delayed by just over a week to 10 days. We finished administering the exams in 9 countries on December 22nd. Then we could give people a bit of a breath so that the second semester started on time, while allowing students and faculty to catch up with the backlog of work by the middle of March, which the vast majority did. These were the practical on-the-ground applications. What this meant with limited bandwidth, with the security situation, was we had to basically tighten the access to the campus to prevent any incidents of safety or conflict or otherwise taking place on it. And that was successful in a very fluid and difficult environment.
So actually, so thank you for mentioning this, because our next question is exactly about that. As the president of AUB, we know that you face a lot of criticism. And part of it came during the recent war, because during that period, you've already mentioned that AUB was briefly closed and access was restricted to alumni and visitors. And so what we'd like to know is what was happening behind the scenes and what drove the decision to temporarily close the campus? And would you like to address any misconceptions?
Sure. Well, with regard to criticism, I don't only accept criticism, I welcome it. Look, this job is one of the most criticized university leadership roles, most scrutinized university leadership roles. Not in Lebanon. In Lebanon and the region, it is by far the most criticized and scrutinized. But in the world, this is one of the few universities that, let's say, along with Harvard, Oxford, and Cambridge, they're much older than us, where every decision we make, or I make, is scrutinized, dissected, put back together, and interpreted. And again, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. No, I actually think we communicated it very clearly, sometimes on an individual level, where people would say, Maria, you know, we paid for access to the Hostler Clinic, we demand, we need this for our own mental health. And I would patiently explain to people, look, we don't make individual decisions, we make collective decisions. And the core group that we have to ensure have access right now is the students and the faculty and the staff. What happened in the war, in the most intensive period for this 11-week or 10-week period, is that more than half of our students were displaced. More than 35% of our faculty and staff were either displaced or wound up hosting large numbers of their extended family. We had to prioritize them. We found housing for many, but we simply couldn't open up the university to everyone the way we would like. So what we did is not inconsistent with our practice. Right now, as you all are taking time to talk with me, it's final exam period, and we learned over the last 6-7 years that you need some peace to be able to study for your exams, to take your exams. And as someone who's worked closely to cultivate the student bodies, to have a dialogue with the administration, with me, but with your deans and teachers and chairs, I think it's very important to be clear. And we were very clear. The priority had to be the students. And do I regret not putting out a sign and explaining to people? No, I think we were clear, we were consistent, and people have to accept that at the end of the day, our job is to make decisions for the greater good of all the community, We did let back the alumni and friends as soon as it was possible, as soon as it was safe. We still have a responsibility to them. This is the only real significant green space, this beautiful campus. And there was danger in even coming to and from this. And we didn't think that it was the time to be rolling about. There was a large number of displaced people. There was active bombing at the very end of the bombardment, quite close in Ras Beirut and Ain al-Mraisi. So our feeling was that we should walk the talk and tell people, stay home. Your mental health is critical, but if you're not safe, if you're not healthy, if you're not alive, you can't have mental health without some physical health and safety.
So, yeah, and just to jump off of that, of course, the criticism during this war period was beyond access to campus. So my question is, did AUB, was it forced during the war to rethink its internal policies on communication and student engagement?
I don't think so. I mean, I think on the contrary, the war reinforced that what we had learned during the Thawra, the uprising, during the pandemic, during the port explosion, during the economic collapse, during the period when there were incidents of violence that threatened to spread, that we had learned our lesson well and we could continue to improve it. If you look at how we helped bring the Lebanese health sector together, because there was previously not all that much collaboration, but mostly rivalry among the different teaching and private and public hospitals, that came together very, very well during the division of labor and the treatments, depending on intensity, during the period of the war. Same for communication. We were very clear. We treat everyone who comes to us from any faction, from any country, right? We would not refuse to treat anyone in the world, okay? From any combatant side. And we educate all and we look after all. So on the contrary, we're extremely clear in our communication during that time. That doesn't mean you won't be criticized and people will like what you do, but I do believe we were quite clear. There wasn't a lot of ambiguity. There had been criticisms of ambiguity back in 2019 and 2020 or different interpretations. Yeah. This time the criticisms were of the decisions themselves, Dina, and that's fine.
Yeah, there was also just some follow-up in terms of like the student engagement policies. That was also, honestly, it's a really hot topic on campus right now, and it seems to be what everybody is talking about. So how do you kind of respond to that?
Clarify what you mean by student engagement policies.
So it kind of involves the events that we have on campus and the relationship that the offices of the different faculties have to hosting certain types of events, and there's a lot of contestation around that right now, and even the language that we have to use around so many topics has to be sensitive and whatnot. Even in my asking the question, honestly.
I don't think we censor anyone, but we're also pragmatic. Frankly, with freedom of speech comes accountability. Mm-hmm. I wish you would see better role models of that in the leaders of the world. But we believe that you are not empty vessels that come here with no knowledge and no responsibility. We treat you as peers. For us, our job is very clearly to protect and steward the university. I was asked this question my first year by a faculty member I'm very friendly with. Whose president are you? The faculty likes you, the students seem at ease, the staff feel you're theirs, and the board appointed you. I said, I'm none of your president, I'm the university's president. My duty is the duty of care to the university. And I treat you all as peers and partners in this enterprise. When the students, many of these events, they never get to me because there's a dialogue between deans, the department chairs, the institute directors, the provost, the registrar, the medical center, about what constitutes an event, a dialogue that is healthy for the university community to engage in. I've only ever canceled, I think, 2 talks in my 10 years here. One had to do with, I would say, what?
the conversion therapy.
Yeah, the conversion therapy, which, in my opinion,
of course.
this would have caused significant mental distress to our LGBTQ community, and it was not based in any science.
100%.
And the other was a speaker who was banned, and we had just agreed to a settlement with the US government. So to allow that speaker, and not invited by us, but invited by a third party, the BBC in this case, would have been a violation of our agreement, and I would have had to accept the cancellation of US aid and a $93 million penalty. I decided to make that decision. I accept full responsibility for it. These things happen. They're not perfect. None of our decisions are perfect, but they're made with the right intention. And in general, I think they're made appropriately, whether by me or others. Could there be more dialogue? Yes, of course, there always could be. But I do think there's healthy dialogue between the students, the faculty, the staff, the administration.
So we're going to move on to a couple of questions before we end this interview about campus and student life. So in light of recent events, the values that Outlook has long stood for have preserved and nurtured the soul of student life at AUB. That we are independent in our expression, varied in our backgrounds and opinions, and with voices that are amplified. So what role do you see for student organizations like Outlook in shaping AUB's identity moving forward from difficult times?
Okay. So, I've never been a journalist. I've been an editor. It's different, an editor of a scientific journal. It's a very different set of guidelines, aspirations, and goals. A scientific journal wants to put out peer-reviewed work that will stand the test of time. Journalism wants to show the facts, the reality, not alternative facts, but the facts as they determine them based on the evidence, and to foster dialogue. I would say fostering dialogue is the thing that both scientific journals and publishing houses and journalistic leadership have in common. I've long believed in journalistic integrity, and that was reinforced by Ibrahim Khoury, who's the very first person I brought on. Ibrahim and I had known each other for more than 20 years, and he'd formerly been an editor-in-chief of a major Lebanese newspaper, Al Anwar, which none of you have read. And Ibrahim has advised generations of Outlook editors and staffs. Our feeling was that we wanted Outlook, both his and mine, and Mary Jaber, my chief of staff, was my first administrative appointment. We wanted Outlook to be able to ask all the right questions, but to do it in a smart, open, and responsible way. We have no problem, any of us, if they criticize or even attack the administration. We did have a problem one of my early years when they crossed the line for what Outlook is licensed for and insisted on the prosecution for treason of a former prime minister for a specious cause. We were warned by the Ministry of Matbu'at, of Communications, that this was beyond the mandate of Outlook, and we said we understand, but they have to be able to criticize everyone. I had a meeting with that Outlook cabinet, said, look guys, I'm safer ground, but if you do accuse the former prime minister or the president or a judge of corruption or treason, you will be asked to appear in court. So it's your choice, you decide. I believe Outlook is critical for the students to understand that they should ask tough questions and they should speak truth to power. And I'm pleased with the performance of Outlook. A very different group of personalities and editors-in-chief, Maria,
Thank you.
have shaped Outlook, but it is a healthy dialogue. The writing in Arabic and English is excellent. I enjoy reading it quietly.
Thank you.
So my view is this was a vital element, not just of student expression. The students express themselves to the administration in multiple ways and to the community. They elect leaders and they write and propose, and they have the kind of conferences that you were talking about, So for me, Outlook is critical because we believe it needs to be nurtured, protected, and basically given wide swath to ask the tough questions.
Thank you.
Okay, so speaking about Outlook and Dr. Khoury overseeing us, we'd like to ask you about the tradition that we have been hosting interviews with you during our the finals period. So we want to ask you, how did this tradition start before?
What started my first year, I'm not aware of the prior tradition. I think other presidents, John Waterbury, I know, have been regularly interviewed by Outlook. So we decided to make it, Brahim and I, into an annual tradition where you would get to ask me whatever it is was on your collective minds, and we would answer it. We thought it wise with time that it be at the end of the year so you could ask things that spanned the whole year, because something might seem so critical in that moment that 2, 3, 4 months later, maybe it doesn't stand the test of time. And that's how this tradition evolved. And I hope when my time is up that my successor, whoever she or he is, will continue this tradition. It's an important way we speak to our student community.
Yeah. And just on a final note, we have Maria and Nader here graduating. So in general, is there any word you'd like to address to our graduates this year?
I'm going to share it in my graduation speech.
Right.
And I'll summarize and say, we expect much more of you than to, not all at once, but then to be highly successful in your careers and lives. We believe that you are being educated for a purpose, and that purpose is to help uplift your communities and to bring them together, whether in Lebanon or abroad. But the other part of my message to Maria, to Nader, and to your class is, don't forget to have fun, to enjoy life. You've had this wonderful tour of an incredible university. There are very few like it. Believe me, I've been at a few great universities. Your life will continue, you will have fun, and you will explore the world with newly opened eyes. Don't forget to enjoy it as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, President
Thank you.
Khuri, for
I
your
enjoyed
time.
it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
really enjoyed talking to you. It was the talk was very eye-opening, in my opinion. And thank you, Dina and Nader, for helping out, for being here. And a final thank you to our watchers, our viewers. Thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you all.
Thank you.